the art world in general. There's been a bit of decline.
A bit is an understatement. It's like the worst since the 70s. I think we struggle as a society to value creativity. But there's actually 139,000 companies in the UK alone who are from the creative sector. They generate 140 billion, which is the same as the food and beverage sector, and 50% more than the telecommunications sector. A large sector, but non-stop underestimated.
MTART agency, how did it become the fastest growing in the art world?
You're not just selling the artworks, you're doing brand partnerships, you're doing public art partnerships, digital collaborations, expanding the revenue streams, but also the audiences of who gets to see the art. The sector has struggled to renew its audiences. It's still speaking to a tiny bit of people. We need to kind of disrupt that, otherwise it will slowly die.
Welcome to Driven Women by Cash and Rocket, where exceptional women break barriers and share their journeys.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today I am in the back of the taxi with Marine Tanguy.
Yes, perfect. I mean, look, you could always be French.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, mais ça va pas.
It's perfection.
All right, we have to really work on that French accent. We're gonna, by the end of it, I'll be fluent. I promise you.
Wait, well, that's the test at the end.
Besides from being a mother, super busy, and have basically established the fastest growing company in the art world, MTART.
Yes.
Which I want you to tell us all about the agency, how you founded it, where you come from. So let's start from, where did you grow up?
So I grew up on a tiny island called Ile de Ré, which is 9,000 people a year, so very, very small. You have basically more birds than people, so you have to imagine this beautiful little island. Everyone is cycling. There's more roads to cycle on, cycling paths, than there are to drive on. So the opposite to my current life. My two parents are primary teachers. My mum is retiring this year. And it's 17 years of just looking at nature. It's the opposite to my life today. It gave me loads of time to think, loads of time to read, loads of time to also become who I wanted to become. You know, you're so, as a woman, so shelled away from projections of other people on you. Like you have time to basically exist on your own terms and then invent who you actually want to be, which I think is very lucky as a woman.
And so you grew up in the island. What, you had already a dream of wanting to be within the art world and move to London?
So I had been very French about it and back from Paris this weekend. I think I was quite romantic about it. I remember reading loads of books from the 19th century, and all those books had this incredible gathering of people where there will be artists and writers and politicians and business people, and I just wanted to be at those dinners. I think that's probably my first ambition. I wanted to be at those dinners not because they were important people, but because the conversation seemed fascinating. And I was like, how can I be a little mouse and just be part of this conversation, listen to them and understand that those conversations shape what we see, what we read, what we think. And that's actually the reason initially culture felt like the right place I wanted to work in. I went to study philosophy, which is something called the Grandes Écoles in France. Dropped out because I could only become a professor at the end. But philosophy was clearly, again, my passion for ideas, the world of conversation. And then I wrote a letter to a BBC culture show, which at the time had Andrew Graham Dixon. And I didn't want to do a motivational letter, and I just wrote exactly what I'm telling you today, that I want to be part of a cultural world where the ideas of writers and artists and business people are integrated. I found all of that really interesting, and I want to do projects to do with that, and that was it. And I think they probably thought that was quite entertaining as a letter to receive from 19 years old. And I got into the BBC Culture Show, and I was super proud. I was like walking around with my little badge. We've written BBC on it. And Andrew Graham Dixon was a character out of a book. I mean, he actually just published a great book on Vermeer a couple of months ago, and I went to one of his lectures, and it was incredible. But he's that kind of larger character than life, and every time he talks about art, it just becomes alive. And so I was really lucky because I went straight into what I had dreamed of, where those were people that were inspiring, like the arts felt alive. I remember we were going into theatres or any place, and it just felt like culture was just so inspiring. So I think initially it was never the job itself. It was always like, I just want to be around those people.
And it was just part of the journey.
Exactly, and I need to find my own space within it and and how to exist within them.
And so with, founding MTART was in 2015?
Yes, I founded the MTART agency 10 years ago now. So I was made a gallery director when I was 21 of the guy who discovered Banksy. So from BBC, I also studied at Warwick University History of Art, where I dropped out again, so I'm a double dropout, because I took on the position of the guy who discovered Banksy at 21, called Steve Lazaridis, managed this gallery in Soho. So you have to think that...
So he discovered Banksy?
He discovered Banksy, he discovered JR, he discovered loads of the big street artists. And it was an incredible... I mean, what's amazing is that he was ex-council estate, so he didn't come from Wales. He was willing to kind of integrate people who were very different to the sector, and that is probably the reason why all of us ended up having a career, because we were very different to what the sector normally had as people working there, which was incredibly fortunate. So I got in, managed a gallery, was very quickly spotted by an investor that was based in LA that had a large advertising company to open my own gallery, because he loved the way that I spoke about art. He thought that was very different and much more accessible than what he had seen in the London art scene. Went to LA.
And why is that? Because you put more emotion into it, or you make it more...
I think maybe not coming from, my first ever painting that I ever looked at was at Le Louvre at 18. So I came to it very late. I think probably, which is the opposite to my kids today, I think coming at it from an outsider perspective, first I had a really direct connection with the arts. It was not to do with social status, it was not to do with the art world. My only connection with it at the start was with the arts, and I think probably it was emotional, and it was about the message, and it was about the stories that runs behind those works. And I think because you're an outsider, you probably can speak to more people about why the art is inspiring.
Yeah.
I remember recently being on a podcast with Anushka, who founded Links, and she revolutionized the jewelry industry by making it very accessible in how you go and buy jewelry, and that's how Links became such a success story. But I think subconsciously that's probably what we did with the arts, and it was not a business plan. It's because I cared about the arts. I wanted more people to be a part of it, and I just also had so much joy being part of that world that it was about sharing all that joy and inspiration. A bit back to Andrew Graham Dixon, I think it's such a joyful thing to look at him and listen to him. He makes you want to be interested in all those painters, and I think that's probably how I felt towards it.
Okay, and MTOD agency, what is it that makes it stand out? I mean, how did it become the fastest growing in the art world? Because there's a lot of different agencies out there. What is it that
So actually the art world doesn't have talent agencies. The art world, as we know, that the music, whether if you're a musician or whether you're an actor or you're a sportive, you will have a talent agency repping you.
Right.
So when I was running my gallery in LA that I could, therefore was our investor, I saw the top talent agencies in Hollywood.
Right.
At a business level, they all worth 7 to 8 billion each. So you have UTA, WME, CA, they all rep every single person that you know, right? Yeah. But what I found really interesting is that specific business model did not exist for the art world. And I felt in my head, how can I integrate that business model for the artists and for the art world? Yeah. And I just felt that would enable the artists to have new revenue streams. Yeah. Because suddenly you're not just selling their artworks, you're doing brand partnerships, you're doing public art partnerships, digital collaborations. We also place art on Emily in Paris and Apple TV. So you're really expanding the revenue streams, but also the audiences of who gets to see the art. And I think, as you can hear from me, is expanding audiences is something that I deeply care about. So I thought, let me attempt that business model for the sector. Yeah. And I think because we had more revenue streams, that's the reason why we grew faster. Because we renewed a lot of the agencies of the sector, that's also probably why we were more visible everywhere in comparison of a classic traditional gallery that's only speaking to people who are interested in art collecting. We suddenly were seen in our latest collaboration with L'Oréal has our artist David Servan-Schreiber, who's partnered up with Atelier Cologne and then invented a scent with them and then had a whole collaboration around it. We've put art, as you know, if you kind of get out of the peninsula today, we have this huge 80-meter piece on New Bond Street that absorbs the pollution from the air. That's beautiful fresco by our Colombian artist, Stefania Tejada. We have so many we also have the poems of Robert Montgomery that's just outside of Euston Station. So, we're really coming into your daily existence. Yeah. Art is not
just make it part of the lifestyle.
Exactly. Art is no more something that you might go and see once every 2 months in a museum. It's something that you get to experience on a daily basis. And I guess it matches my experience with the arts. I breathe in and out of art. And obviously today we all put together for that podcast, but I could be as much bare feet surrounded by art that I am. I could be in a very luxurious environment with it. My relationship with the arts is throughout my life, not just a part of it. And that's something that therefore we built as multiple division within the business, with the brand partnership division, the public art partnership divisions, the digital partnership divisions, like thinking of different ways in which artists could work with people to integrate the art.
Okay. And how do you find the artists?
So we get tons of applications. We get hundreds every month.
Okay.
I think the joy is really how do you go out there, which is similar to, when you think of who you interview, but it's how do you go out there and get the best stories? And, artists who people love are the best stories. They're the ones that ultimately pushes a story or a way to tell the story or a style or a concept that you've never encountered before. That's who you want to sign. Because that's
how do you know they love them before you sign them? If they haven't, are they not upcoming?
So there's a mix. There's a mix of established artists and upcoming. I think you probably have the experience of having been in the sector for a long time on who you think the sector hasn't heard yet, who you think is different to the sector. And I think also you get to still research and analyse how the traction of the artist, who has already engaged with it or not. So there's probably a mix, as always, of everything of research meets with intuition because you've been with the sector long enough. Yeah.
And in regards to, the art world in general, there's been a bit of decline.
Yeah. A bit is an understatement. That's very British. Sorry. The bit is minus 70% last year.
Okay, tiny bit more than I expected. Is it really that much?
Yes, it's the worst since the 70s.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes. And
how do you then? So then these deals are super important with the brands, with the collaboration.
So we're not affected for that reason because obviously, we have built revenue streams outside of the traditional sector.
Yeah.
Well, look,
And that's how you become the fastest growing agency in the art world.
I feel it's as an entrepreneur, you don't even want to celebrate anyone who is struggling because ultimately running a business, as you know, is super hard. So I have deep respect. Exactly. I have deep respect for anyone who is building a business. But I do think this is showing that we need to rethink the current model.
The structure.
We always knew that 80% of galleries are not profitable, that the model is already very difficult to support artists and represent them. But I think it's clearly a time where not only are we impacted by the economics, but also at large, the sector has struggled to renew its audiences. It's still speaking to a tiny bit of people.
Yeah.
And I think that's what needs to be renewed. And there's been great ways, totally differently because we're in a car, but Formula One has done a great exercise recently. They've gone to Netflix and they've got women to get involved. And so I think with anything, there are ways to do it. But right now, the art world is very stuck with the same type of people and we need to kind of disrupt that. Otherwise, it will slowly die, which is a great shame because it's an incredibly inspiring sector.
Yeah. No, I agree. And it's just to think differently and not having that same thing that we've had last.
Exactly. And I think that's the joy of it. And I mean, you speak to so many people from your podcast who have rethought how to engage people. So it's just fine in that way.
Yeah. Right. So can you give us a few, what are the upcoming, artists that you really have your eye on that
are exciting to work with today? Okay, you have to understand that I'm very biased in loads of my answers.
Sure.
I think Raven Declair is an incredibly exciting artist. So first of all, the odds she had to defy are huge. She's working class, she's black. To do the kind of projects she's done is 0.001% of that chance of that happening.
Right.
She's now...
Where is she based?
She's based here.
Okay.
She's British. She was behind several large sculptures in the US, a very large commission. She's just got commissioned by the Liverpool Museum as well. She was behind that sculpture that maybe you've seen from us on representing postpartum in October.
Yeah.
That went viral.
Yeah. And that's her.
And she's under 30.
Amazing.
And she is one of the smartest brains I've ever encountered, mixed with the ability to constantly rethink the technique.
Yeah.
She even Cherry Blair now collects her. She's the most humble, down to earth person I know. So I would say Raven. I think it's also that the joy is always to see that this is such a nice human being as well on the back of it.
Yeah. And so, how did you get connected with her? Like,
I DM'd her 8 years ago. She was doing this kind of weird hanging feet from her graduate show. So, you know, my team for had lost a plot.
her graduate show from where?
CMS.
Right.
And I feel like
And what does that stand for?
Central St. Martin's.
Right.
Sorry, that is me.
Yeah, no,
That
just
is
wanna
me. I
make
should
sure
not do
I'm-
that as an industry level. But I also dislike when people do that. So she had just graduated. She's doing this hanging feet, and which didn't really look that commercial, partially. And I mean, that's the beauty of Raven, is that she's able to do incredibly elevated fine art that questions topics in society that are necessary, all the while having a financial reality, which is a very difficult exercise, as we know. And I asked her to meet me. At that time, I had just when we met, it was like a year later, and I had just given birth to my first. It was Saturday morning at Fisher's, good old Fisher's. And I just remember having the baby on my lap and then listening to her, and I just was so confident she'd be successful.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that with, I mean, you've named your podcast around drive, but I just knew she didn't have this arrogance, but she had this quiet confidence.
Yeah.
It wasn't to do with proving her to people. It's just that she was going to achieve great things.
Yeah.
And it was tangible. You would have felt like you would be an idiot not to be part of that journey, because
Yeah.
it was just so precious.
Yeah.
And it was just all there on that morning. And I haven't got a picture of us two for that morning, but I have a picture of me waiting for her with my son. And it's just so nice because it's just, you just remember those moments and you're like, I think that woman is likely. And obviously, she's now a Forbes 30 under 30. She's millions in revenue. Like, she's done incredibly well in terms of being acquired by museum acquisition as well. So she's done incredibly well.
Yeah.
But I remember so precisely that first morning too.
And catch her attention as well.
Yeah, and it's very special. I think nurturing talents and spotting talents is by far the largest reward to help. And I think I get it through mentoring as well. But when you just have such a strong conviction that that person deserves everything,
Yeah.
and then you help them out, and you see that happening, I think it's a very special thing.
Yeah. Well, and also I think, if you have a manager or an agent, they do need to know everything to be able to find the right deals that really fit your personality and what you can deliver. So it's interesting. I like that whole concept. So are there any big kind of campaigns that she's going to come out with?
So Raven is on that commission of the Liverpool Museum, which will be massive, which will be at the end of this year. We actually got a very cool one. We are kicking off the Six Nation Women, because it's Women World Cup, this year in April. It's the first time that women are getting to play in the main stadium in Cardiff, not the side stadium. And we're kicking it off with a big land art painting by artist Claire Loxton with the UN Women UK. And it's a huge celebration of the fact that women's sports are on the rise, as we know.
Yeah,
finally. And then we're doing that obviously with a very large piece by a very successful female artist called Claire Loxton. So that's one of our many campaigns I'm looking forward to this year. You will see me with my T-shirt from the UN Women UK, cheering, and I think that again shows, because we also kicked off the World Cup in Qatar with art, but it shows the importance of having art as part of large moments like this. I think it's such a joy to kind of make it a part of it. So I think that's one of the one I'm most looking forward to.
And where do you see the synergies between the sport and the art, and how do you tie it in?
So I think if you look at the stadium and the grass, the piece is going to be across all the grass.
Okay.
Now, think of our world as a world that's only increasingly visual. So if I go and attend a game, I'm filming, putting that on my TikTok, on Instagram, and most of my consumption of the game is actually visual nowadays. It's not just the game and the results of the game. Is how, like, you've seen that with the Super Bowl this weekend, right? It's everything around the game that's important.
The entertainment that
and
comes
culture
with
has always been, and entertainment has always been part of that.
Yeah.
So I just wanted always art to be a part of that large entertainment conversation. So here the art is kind of the main focus as the game kicks off, and shows again that art gets to be integrated as part of major cultural moments. So that's how I see the collaboration. But you're also in a world again that everything becomes visual. your entire expense of everything is visual. I think even just us in this cab is about like, you know, how the lining is done of the cab and everything. Like the experience itself is
this
visual.
cab is super beautiful.
Exactly, and I feel like even a podcast, which by definition is audio, is now also a visual experience.
Yeah.
So there's an amazing role for artists to play in that, in integrating the art into a world that is increasingly visual.
Yeah. And so, running this company.
Yes.
And having 3 children.
Yes, I mean you have 6.
Yeah, but
I can never say 3 is a lot. It's like if it's half of your workload, you know, like so it's actually tiny in that comparison.
But how do you manage it? How do you know, every day school run and, you know, being there and...
Well, I think you need to contribute to the conversation just as much on that question. I think, just like you, I have an amazing partner because we discussed it. And I think ultimately my husband is someone that believes in what I do and value what I do, value what I think, value what I want to create and build, just as much as what he's building, because he's also got his own company. And I think that's already something that's very valuable because you get all the mental health support, emotional support, and also you don't have the doubts. You know, he's never doubted the fact that I should, you know, run this company and do it. After this, I leave very essentially. I do feel, you know, we discussed it, but last week I was in Qatar because we received investment from Qatar several years back, and I was giving a talk about Basel, the art fair, arriving in Qatar, which was a big milestone for Qatar.
Wait. Oh, Art Basel is going to Qatar?
It was last week, yes, it was the first edition. So it was a big momentum for Qatar to be kind of like, it's kind of almost a culmination, a celebration of 2 years of strategic cultural investment for them to kind of get to that point. So I was there, but I was also in Paris.
Right.
So Qatar was 36 hours to make sure that, because my husband was already in Paris, that I was back on time for the kids, and he had already left. Then I took the kids, the 3 of them, God knows how you do that with 6, but I took the 3 of mine on the Eurostar on my own on Friday morning. But if I was not...
So relaxing, isn't it?
Well, to be fair, as you know with kids, you have moments where it all goes to crap.
Yeah.
I must say on Friday, I looked like this really irritating mother because it really went well. And my eldest had his little Legos because I had a little plaque. My toddler, who's 2.5, had his little stickers. And my baby was perfectly well behaved. And I was like, I look like one of those really irritating mothers who has it together. But actually, if you saw us 2 hours later, it would be a completely different story. But it happened to be a really good train journey. Well, I could smile blissfully, saying that I've got this together. But it, obviously, as we know, this is only, it's an illusion. It's not reality. But I think if I was not to leave centrally, that would not be possible because the Heathrow Express is 20 minutes. Eurostar from my place is 10 minutes. And it means that all of these things are possible. Same with... The school is not far. The nursery is not far. Like it's my
logistically, you are
my city
yourself.
that exactly. And same with my workplace. With the city that I use is a very close net of location. I think if you add commute to this, I don't think it's possible. Or I think if it is possible, it becomes substantially more stressful. So I would say that this is, and again, that comes with a huge amount of privilege. After that, I think I am someone. I mean, I'm sure you've realised that. I am incredibly organised. I'm very structured, and I'm sure you even more so with 6. But I never leave anything to the day after. If there's a task, I get it done now. As you know, you have no idea whether it's work or kids, which crisis is about to happen. So if you partially let task wait, then you have the chance to be completely overwhelmed by how much you have to do. And obviously there's a lot. And as you know, I run the company, but I also published a book, the second one coming up this year, and I write a lot. So I do loads of academic papers too. So you could completely run, same with board positions, to be overwhelmed easily in like 2 seconds. That could just, your life could become a nightmare.
So you're good at structuring your day?
I think I'm good at getting things done fast and well, and I'm good at making decisions fast, and I'm good at also knowing which task is one that you get done now, which one is one that you have to think of, and that dissociation. But I have an inbox 0 almost at all times, like because otherwise you just don't have the headspace to deal with things where you have to really think about it. And as we know, there's times where you have to take your time and think, okay, how am I going to address this? If you are running, if you're not on top of your task, you just don't have that headspace. And I think that is when it becomes incredibly stressful.
Yeah.
So you have to be like this.
Yeah.
I found it is my nature. I'm quite like this.
Yeah.
So I didn't think I had to adapt to be that nature. But yeah, I mean, I am that person that when we arrived from Paris, I already have unpacked the bag, and within 1 hour, everything is already sorted. You know, like I am
Structured.
probably your worst nightmare if someone is not like this. You know, my husband sometimes have to deal with this. But you know,
So you're OCD.
I am very much someone that gets things done.
Okay.
You have to accept that. But I think I think with young kids, when they're older, I'm sure it can be different. With young kids, I don't know how else you can do it.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's pretty important to be on top
It's
of
about
it.
exactly.
Yeah. And so, what's for the future of the whole art world, and with everything that's happening with AI, etc. What do you think that has an effect? How do you think that's going to work?
Well, so firstly, I think we struggle as a society to value creativity. What I mean by this is, for instance, if I speak about the arts, most of us think of the non-for-profit side of the arts, which is all the museum side. But there's actually 139,000 companies in the UK alone who are from the creative sector.
Right.
They generate 140 billion, which is the same as the food and beverage sector, and 50% more than the telecommunication sector. So you are in a sector that is a large sector, but non-stop underestimated. You know, when I was fundraising, investors did not want to touch the arts because it felt like something that was cute and pretty and not a real business case. So you already are in that kind of sector where, despite the fact that we add tremendous value, and it's also beyond the economics as we know, because we've all chosen to live in London because, you know, there's like a ballet down the road, theatre down the road, the best cinemas. It's a joy to be in a place that is cultural. So the value you add is so much more beyond just the economics, but the economics are very tangible and undervalued, which means that most people, and you see that already with some of the fashion magazines, like who are using AI models, who are using the AI to kind of do the shoot as well. There is already, in the advertising sector, a willingness to undercut the creative sector and creatives. I am obviously stand strongly against that because, like I mentioned with the reason why we love London, creatives don't just do a job, they make our life more inspiring. You know, I think I would not want to live in a city where there's just only finance bros. I love them, but that would be quite a sad place to live in. You know, like I think the place that you live in is a joy because it's cultural, and that's why, again, you love to live in those places. So I would say that before you think, oh, that will probably remove 20% of my marketing budget, you know, think of the direct consequences of who you're undercutting and the type of world you decide to live in. You know, where you're saying to your kids, I value efficiency over anything that's inspiring, and I'm willing to undercut anyone that's, that does anything inspiring because it suits me. You know, that's a very direct statement that you're making ethically to your kids as well as you're making that decision. So definitely think on the back of that. I think it's also the creative sector has never been that good as articulating all that value, and I think we need to come substantially more together to do that. And as you can hear, and some on the board position that I took, I'm definitely going to be someone that's going to bang about it over the coming years. I have nothing against AI. I am married to someone who is in tech and a VC, so, you know, I'm immersed as much in tech than I am in art. I have a strong division of digital collaborations and digital artists, with a lot of them being AI artists. Yeah. I would say, again, as a B Corp, that I care a lot about the ethics of it, meaning they don't steal data, they train the models on archival imagery where they have cultural consent for it and they seek the consent of it. They're very mindful of how they go about the usage of it, which is another issue.
And stick to the rules.
Exactly. It's another issue as well on AI, is that you might use an image for your PowerPoint, but you might not realize that that image is actually stolen and wasn't paid from the person it was stolen from, you know? So there's so much of the ethics. But therefore,
Now, how do you... I mean, that's super difficult to control.
As a consumer?
Well, as a consumer, but also, you know, you pick a photo online, unless it's straight away say it's owned by... Yeah. How many goes back and then say, oh, who did actually take that photo?
So I think as a consumer, first of all, it's about consuming media who display that responsibility. So if you go on BBC, for instance, they have a whole department that checks the sources of the imagery and make sure that, people are credited properly, that there's no misinformation. For instance, as we know, same in geopolitics, sometimes you have images of a certain conflict used for another. So I think it's the consumption of the media who already spend money to do that and do that properly.
Yeah.
I think it's the same with companies. I mean, obviously having a label like B Corp, but like it's the same on making sure that you have companies who carry ethics.
Yeah.
And I think this is the largest question with AI is right now those are owned by large private companies that sell our data to the advertising sectors. With us, giving our consent to that, there's a lot of regulations that still have to come before I'll be very happy with it. Because if it was run by the government and in a very transparent way that you could see how the data could be passed on, very different conversation. Here, those are ultimately money-making strategies.
But there aren't any really agencies.
No, they're not. No. So this is why you have to make sure that, again, you don't, like, I think I'm when people just say I'm confiding and relinquish all my consent to all my data to those companies, and I'm happy to kind of put all my thinking into it, I find that incredibly dangerous because I'm just like, you're basically giving away what's most precious to you to someone that is known to monetize it at no cost. For me, that feels mad, but that's my opinion.
Yeah. Interesting. And so
that could be about 3 hours of conversation.
Yeah. So we sadly don't have that long, but no, but you're very right about a lot of it. Yeah. So within the whole art world and the markets, given it's down 70%, you said.
Yeah.
Where are we seeing the growth then? Is it the Middle East an interesting market?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think first.
So is Europe dead or stand still? Or?
I think Europe. So first of all, obviously we are B2B business mainly. So 80% of what we do is B2B. Of course, you can buy artworks, but that's not our main kind of business.
Yeah.
So I think the growth will happen through B2B because there's a lot of corporates that could still be supporting artists and working with artists and collaborating with them. So I think that's a market that's not tapped on as much as it should be. Top markets are, of course, the Middle East. The Middle East is, but for anything, like last week for Doha, Basel, you also had the Web Summit. This is where everything is happening right now in terms of the larger investment conversations. And they have unlocked an incredible amount of money for the arts, whether that's Saudi, UAE, and Qatar, and they understand the value of storytelling. They know this is to do with storytelling and culture, that they can make the difference. And so obviously the Middle East is a very key market. I mean, I wouldn't downplay, first of all, UK and Europe is quite different. London and New York remains the top places for the art markets. This is where I could never have grown the business I've grown if I was outside of London. This is where you still have, like I mentioned, a strong creative sector with a lot of companies who are very active. And you have a very professionalized sector. Like Qatar, yes, has a lot of government funding, but one of the big conversations last week was the fact that there's almost no galleries and there's very few collectors. There's a lot of upper class here who are still supporting the arts and who have been educated to want to support it and want to be part of it. So I wouldn't just write off the place we're in, because I still think that the UK is a very key place, different than Europe. Europe has a very long-standing tradition of loving the arts. So usually, whether that's Germany or France, for instance, they have government support at a high level because they care deeply about it and it's part of their history as well. So artists will still be able to strive on it. You have a few governments like Ireland who are doing interesting things, where in October last year, Ireland is starting to give a stipend to artists, so like a universal revenue if you're an artist. So you have a few things that are being tested at a government level to keep their creatives in light of our AI conversation as well, to how do we retain amazing creative brains in the country that we live in, because we know the value of having those creative brains. The US, obviously, geopolitically is incredibly challenging now. The US remains a very large market. Our top contracts remain also still in the US. But and
why is it challenging?
I mean, as we know, with the current politics, it's like I wouldn't call it a civil war, but we are not far off from such friction internally. And that is never good for business, I think, ultimately. Like, it's... having such divides, especially because you've seen it, and you've seen even the statements from the Super Bowl this weekend, is such a, and the Grammys, you have almost two different countries and they barely speak. That can't be positive for anyone.
No.
Because as we know, business thrive when there's more collaboration and when it's more peaceful. And the arts also and culture are always around diversity of thinking. So they're not going to strive well in a place where that's not celebrated as well. So all of that will be challenged. But I think, again, that could change in a few years.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that the wealth is not there. It doesn't mean that the project can't happen there. But it means that, therefore, it's complicated. But I think we live in a world where, anyway, a lot of places are complicated right now. So, and the arts have a lot that they can say about it and do about it and act about it. So that's also why it's an interesting conversation, but it will be difficult.
Yeah. And what about the whole mental health? When it comes to, you talk about it on your different panels. Yeah, exactly.
So I published my first book called The Visual Detox of Penguin 2 years ago on basically a lot of what we discussed today, but you're consuming 10,000 images a day, the effect of that consumption of imagery that on how it shapes your brain.
Yeah.
Like, you know, for women, for instance, we get told you can drive and you can be super driven, more than drive, because you know I don't drive.
But she is going to do the Cash and Rocket. Oh yeah.
I don't have my driving license.
But she's going to find it.
It's a work in progress.
Exactly.
So you can be super driven, you can take on the world, but actually, as we know, aesthetically, if we leave the peninsula now, just have a look around London, most of the images we see is about objectifying us and telling us, which we both care about, all of us care about it, on how we look, right?
Yeah.
So it's always that double messaging. And I think it's looking at what is the effect of constantly consuming certain type of images and how you internalize it and how do you end up acting on it without even noticing that you're acting on it. That's a lot of what I care about and a lot of what I write about. So therefore, mental health, as we know, is very overwhelmed because we've never been more overwhelmed with content than ever. We're targeted by all types of content. I think what you're doing is therefore very important because I think conversations really matters. Like you need to slow the intake of content and take your time to really think and have good conversation. But it's of course deeply overwhelming.
When also education is key.
Exactly.
You know?
And exactly. And I think visual
happen.
literacy first is something that we've therefore pushed on, like again, how to spot visual information, how to understand the consumption of that visual content. But I think I'm positive on, I'm sure you've seen the social media ban a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
I feel very lucky. You've had teenagers through all of those changes, so you had substantially more changes than I.
Yeah.
I come at a stage where my kids are walking into a world where now bans are put in place and they won't have access to that content as much as yours.
Yeah.
So I feel very lucky because I feel that the world is clearly coming to a place where they're realizing that we need to put guards and stops and everywhere to preserve the mental health of our kids.
Yeah.
And I feel very grateful to be in this timing, but I'm sure you've experienced that with your kids, that it's
and we
been
had
hard.
to put all sorts of rules in
Exactly.
because otherwise they would be on an iPad the whole time.
Exactly.
Which I'm not for. And they're not allowed social media until a certain age, all of that. But the problem is not just what they're allowed to, because then they're with friends who then has access to it, and then I think it's got to be controlled.
Exactly.
I'm very for that.
Yeah, which is exciting is happening.
Certain age they should be allowed it, but not when they're young.
Exactly.
They don't need it. They need to be out playing a football or whatever that might be. Cool. Right. So besides from obviously being super busy, are there some projects that are coming up?
So there's a big news first business-wise that you know, but I can't tell yet.
Yeah.
I'm very excited. It's a year of change for me. I've joined a lot of boards too, like I mentioned earlier. I'm sure you've guessed from a lot of what I'm saying. I am stepping up on the changes I want to see socially. I'm very driven by how arts can, ultimately drive positive change, whether this is for our gender, that's why I'm part of the UN Women UK as well, but or whether this is on, you know, how more people get to have access to the arts, how more people access again visual literacy. So my past is more and more social, and I have a lot of joy in that positive change as well. And it feels very nice. Like, you know, I don't think I would join you on the 6 kids. So I feel
I can change.
I mean, I could always bring you back, and as we know, only idiots change their mind.
Exactly.
But yeah, I feel very fulfilled where, you know, I just gave birth to my 3rd last summer, so it's just about to be 7 months tomorrow. And I have a life that, you know, I'm sure you've had it, but for me, sadly, the word in English doesn't exist. It's a word called vertige in French, but vertigo in English is only negative.
Yeah.
Vertige is more the fact that suddenly you just look at your life and you're like, that is so much of what I had hoped for, and how fortunate that it is here. You know, that's why I think it's not the same word. Vertige in French is positive. You're just taking that distance, and overlooking the bigger picture, and I think I'm very much in that place where it's just it kept going. My life has kept going to the directions of building projects, supporting artists, and supporting the arts in a way that really felt very meaningful to me. And I think you kind of asked me about my relationship with drive, but I think that's the thing, is that my connection to drive is much more the wish to make ideas happen that I believe should exist, than this kind of must achieve X. And of course they do end up being achievements by definition. But that has continued, and I think I'm deeply excited. I think I continue year on year to just be excited about what's next. All the while kind of thinking, wow, that's amazing what we get to do, and how many people we get to impact, and how viral some of our projects goes, and how many people get to text us and saying that they've loved what we did, you know? It's a very special feeling.
Amazing. And any advice you give to any of those young girls who like to go into the art industry? Something that you wish you had been told yourself, or you would have... So
I'm always careful about advice to younger girls. First of all, for me, like, I am so grateful to myself when I was younger, because the sacrifices I took and made are so much harder than my life today. My life today is so much more comfortable than what I had then. The reason I say that is because I think it's always so hard, and I think, you know, you see us all put together and it all seems to make sense. But there's been, you know, anxious night, there's been worries about whether or not you could pay your staff, being a couple of weeks away from it. There's been moments where you've made tons of mistakes, where you wish as a human being you made different decisions, or, you know, that you behave slightly better, because I think all of that comes with experience as well in how to handle very difficult situations under pressure. So I think all those things came in that place where you now see something that looks like a picture that's put together. But it's hard because my picture of me not being put together is a lot less documented, of course, because you were less known. But it's to trust that, therefore, on their bad days, we have about 100 of those. We still get rejected non-stop. We still look at a spot on our face thinking, oh, I just wish I didn't have that spot, this is so annoying. We still doubt ourselves. We're still very self-critical, and it's hard not, in a world that's now so polished, it's hard to see that. So it's not an advice, it's just to constantly try and dig in for the human being and the person that you're looking at, because as we know, stories are not put perfectly together. That's just not how life happens. But after consistency...
Well, as you said, there's been so many challenges to get where you are.
Exactly. And I think that's to kind of be gentle to yourself as you encounter all of those. And to my point of privileges, me doing a lot of things like you is because I have privileges too. So just trying to kind of acknowledge that you're coming maybe at a different point, and to be kind to yourself on the different resources that you're being given, therefore.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us here at Driven Women at the Peninsula in this gorgeous taxi. And thank you for
Thank you, that was a real
basically
joy.
telling us all about your journey.
Because
it's so inspirational.
I mean, also, I can't drive, so I'm always great at the back of a taxi. You know, that's my best place.
This is what she's going to do in April. She's going to be in the back of the car.
I'm always at the back. This is my favourite place.
Well, you know, some people... I'm a control freak, so I have to drive. But
Well, so nice. Thank you for the conversation. Thank you for the great questions. And I think you should have contributed because I think you're such an inspiration.
No, thank you so much. No, it's so nice. Thank you.